Shut up! You're supposed to listen to what I say, shouted Tom as he suddenly slapped me across the face. What? Go cool off outside. And don't bother coming back. It was the first time a man had ever hit me, and I was in shock. Frozen in disbelief. It took a few moments for the pain and fear to set in. I can't take this anymore. I've decided to leave this house and get a divorce. I had been preparing for this day. My name is Jennifer. I'm just your average working wife, 3 years into marriage. Things are looking good this month, I muttered as I checked my bank account. Ever since I was single, I've loved saving money. Growing up in a not-so-rich family, I've always been used to living frugally. Thanks to that, even as an adult, living modestly was never a problem for me. Always spending carefully, saving as much as I could. I've invested those savings into mutual funds and stocks. Having majored in business administration in college, I was quite familiar with economics and how money works. Started investing in college, and so far, it's been smooth sailing. I always dreamt of buying a house where my entire family could live happily. I'm gonna reach my goal soon. I met Tom at the same company I worked at. He was kind and reasonably good-looking, popular among the female employees. Tom and I hit it off when we worked together, and things progressed from dating to marriage smoothly. We don't have any kids yet. Being in our 3rd year of marriage, and considering my age, I kinda want to have kids soon. But with both of us working, our schedules hardly align. Tom's not interested in trying to have a baby. Every time I try to discuss it, he changes the subject. Maybe I should quit my job and make some time for us as a couple. But if Tom doesn't cooperate, I can't just quit. The reason Tom's not interested in having a kid? Our current lifestyle suits him just fine. Though we work at the same company, our departments differ. Tom's department doesn't require overtime, but the pay is the lowest in the company. My department is crucial for the company, so while there's a lot of overtime, the pay is higher. Tom gets home on time and lazes around, playing video games until I get back. But if we have a kid, he won't be able to keep doing that. That's why he's not enthusiastic about starting a family. For now, my focus is on building a home for our potential growing family. That's why I keep saving. I believe that once a child is born, Tom will surely help out. Another thing that bothers me is my mother-in-law. She lives just a 5-minute walk away from our apartment. Right after we got married, my father-in-law's health deteriorated. We were told that he might need care, so we moved closer. But he passed away shortly after due to old age. Ever since then, my mother-in-law has been coming to our house almost every day. It would be fine if she just came by, but she always has something sarcastic to say. I'm home. You're late, aren't you? She mumbles this without making eye contact with me. Good evening. Do you always get home this late? Are you really working, I wonder? Is she going to make sarcastic comments like this today as well? I'm exhausted from work, so I at least want to relax at home. But thanks to my mother-in-law's sarcasm, my home has become a place where I can't feel at ease. So, what are you planning to do for Tom's dinner, since you're getting home at this hour? It's always like this. She only worries about Tom, who probably just lounges around after leaving work on time, and she blames me. I'll start preparing it now. You're going to start making it now? What time do you think it is? While I'm being persistently blamed, Tom continues playing his video game. Where did the kind Tom go? Or is this his true self? In any case, why do I have to prepare meals for a fully grown adult who is not a child? We both work, so if Tom would do the housework when he gets home early, my burden would be significantly lighter. Such thoughts bubble up in my head. My mother-in-law has never worked and is a housewife. She has no intention of understanding the feelings of working women from the start. Besides, if she saw Tom doing housework, she would definitely start helping. Then, I would get sarcastic comments from her again. Well, there's no way Tom is going to do the housework, so this worry is unnecessary. Hey! Jennifer, are you listening? Sorry. I'll start preparing the meal right away. In the end, it seems like it's more peaceful for me to just do everything alone while being criticized. That's all right. I've prepared everything and already fed Tom. Oh. I see. Thank you. Of course, she hasn't prepared anything for me. I just need to prepare my own meal, so that's fine, I guess. Sadly, this has become such a usual thing that I can think like this. While I'm preparing dinner in the kitchen, I hear this conversation. Hey, Tom. I have a dinner party with my friends coming up. It's at that new French restaurant, so the membership fee is around $200, but could you cover it for me? Yeah. And, I want to get some new clothes and go to the salon, so could you give me an additional $500? Okay, got it. Tom responds easily without taking his eyes off his game. $500 for a meal with friends. What kind of sense of money does she have? Then, Tom rummages through my purse without asking, takes out $500, and hands it to his mother. Thanks, Tom. You're a lifesaver. She thanks only Tom and puts the money in her wallet. I'm stunned. What have these people just done? Can they not see me? When my mother-in-law goes to the bathroom, I go up to Tom and confront him. Why are you taking money out of my wallet? I had no choice, I didn't have any cash on me. That doesn't mean you can just take cash out of someone else's wallet. And my mother-in-law, who accepts the money, is just as bad. If you can't give her the money yourself, you should have said no. We don't have that kind of money to spare. Tom and I are arguing when my mother-in-law comes back. What happened? Is something wrong? When my mother-in-law asks this, I'm about to tell her the truth when Tom interrupts me. Nothing's wrong. Nothing's wrong? Does Tom not understand how hard it is to pull $500 out of our budget? I manage our finances. Since my income is higher, I pay for everything, from rent to living expenses, from my account. Tom doesn't contribute his salary, he uses it all for his allowance. And he spends it all on games, gambling, all on entertainment. I asked him to at least contribute to the living expenses, but he just dodged the issue. Just last month, I know he gave his mother $500 because she said she wanted to buy clothes and a bag. The month before that, it was for a kimono, cosmetics, salon, and spa expenses. When I think about it, he's been giving her $500 every month. As I'm stewing in my thoughts, my mother-in-law says, I heard there seemed to be a dispute about money. That's why I came by. Don't make a fuss just because I'm offering some pocket money. Doing a good deed for your parents won't bite you back. You'd be pleased if your elderly parents were well taken care of, right? My mother-in-law doesn't seem to be fazed at all. The whole family has a warped sense of money. No matter how much we save, it just ends up being spent on my mother-in-law's extravagant expenses. Determined, I thought today has to be the day, and with all the courage I could muster, I spoke up to her. We really don't have the extra money. To be honest, supporting you with $500 every month is really hard on us. Upon hearing this, my mother-in-law let out a deep sigh. You see, this money is for socializing expenses. Buying new clothes and dining out with the neighbors is an important part of socializing, isn't it? If it's just for chatting with the neighbors, isn't a coffee shop good enough? Why does it always have to be a fancy French restaurant or a high-end inn? She's always updating her wardrobe for every occasion and picking up the tab for everyone, such a show-off. But it's not like she's liked by everyone, in fact, she's just being taken advantage of. You, on the other hand, hardly connect with the neighbors. I'm doing all this networking for you. She's the one choosing to do all this, I didn't ask her to. Being stingy with socializing expenses, now that's just miserly. You're not skimping on Tom's socializing budget too, are you? Jennifer is quite a penny pincher, you know. I always have a hard time because she skimps on the drinking and gambling expenses. Tom's drinking parties and gambling are not social expenses, they are purely for entertainment. Being stingy about spending money for socializing with colleagues. Tom will never get promoted at this rate. Poor thing. Jennifer, you really need to review your household budget. Tom and his mother-in-law say whatever they please. Today was just dreadful again. Maybe she felt relief after taking the money and saying what she wanted to say. But as she headed to the exit, she glared at me again. If you want to get divorced, Tom, I think it's fine anytime. Your room is still there, just as you left it. You can come back anytime. All right. Thanks, Mom. With a rough swing, she closed the door behind her and left. What was that all about just now? When I turned around, Tom had already started playing his video game again. I was so angry, I laid into him. Why did you give her $500? Month after month, where is that money even coming from? Without stopping his game, Tom just ignored what I was saying. I stood in front of the TV and said to Tom, "Are you even listening? I'm asking you what you're thinking." Unable to see the TV, Tom answered with a bothered look on his face. What's the big deal? It's just $500. Stop being so stingy. Do you have any idea how hard it is to take out $500 from our household budget? But like Mom said, it's social expenses, so it's a necessary expense. That's not a necessary expense at all. Why does it cost $500 just to talk to the neighbors? Aren't all the meals being paid by your mom? This is ridiculous. No matter how desperately I talked, Tom just wouldn't listen. Whether he found it annoying or just wanted to get back to his game, he didn't even try to understand what I was saying. Also, are you considering getting divorced? If you're going to be that cheeky, I have my own thoughts on the matter. Tom didn't deny it. He was actually considering divorce. Can you just move? I want to play my game. Saying that, he brushed me aside with a gesture and started his game again. Maybe it's hopeless. Maybe getting a divorce is for the best. But I just can't make that decision, knowing the kind Tom I used to know. And then, an incident occurred. On my way home from work, I stopped by the local supermarket. I usually pay with cash, but I didn't have enough on me today, so I decided to pay with my credit card. That's when the cashier gave me an awkward look. "Ma'am, it seems like this card can't be used." Huh? Why's that? It seems you've reached your limit. What? A bad feeling washed over me. I hurried home. Tom! Tom, are you here? There was no response from Tom. Then, I saw Tom's bag on the floor, and papers were scattered everywhere. What is this? I looked at the papers, and they were bills for numerous credit cards. These credit cards were family cards, and the account was linked to mine. Tom is bad with money management, often maxing out his credit cards. That's why his cards are maxed out, and he can't use them anymore. Since then, the only credit card Tom has is this family card. I quickly looked through the bills and saw a list of things I didn't recognize. Clothes, bags, shoes, high-end sushi, French cuisine, all the bills were for luxury items. The total amount for all the bills was an astounding $50,000. I was stunned and froze on the spot. I checked the number of zeros multiple times to make sure, but there was no mistake. And then Tom and his mother arrived. What's this about the credit card being charged $50,000? Did you use this? Yeah, I used it. What do you mean by that? Mom asked me to go shopping with her and out to meals. Why did you use this card? It can't be helped, my cards are unusable. It's fine, isn't it? This is just filial piety. This money is going to be withdrawn from my account, you know? My account? We're married, so it's not just your account, right? I collapsed on the spot, my knees giving out beneath me. All the money I had worked so hard to save up was used up so easily. Jennifer, you can't say things like my money when it comes to our shared finances as a married couple. As always, my mother-in-law showed no sign of remorse. Jennifer, you're lying about not being able to give me money even though you have it. I wonder just how greedy you can be. Without any apology, Tom's blatant defiance is driving me to the brink of rage. All the feelings I've been holding back are now surging up, exploding all at once. Don't mess with me. This is the savings I worked so hard for since before I was married. Give it back to me. Hey, what are you talking about? What's mine is yours and what's yours is mine. That's how marriage works, right? That's right. Instead of you showing gratitude to my parents, I'm doing it on your behalf. You should be more thankful to me. And to think, he's been receiving $500 a month for pocket money, and he even secretly used a credit card behind my back. This account even includes the money I saved up before I was married. Using it without asking is no different than stealing. Give it back to me. Hey, cut it out. Who are you calling a thief? Angered by the word thief, Tom responds irritably. This credit card is a family card. I can use it however I want since I'm part of the family. That's right. Tom has really been doing a lot for me. In fact, you didn't notice the $50,000 bill until it came, right? So there's no problem. The account linked to the credit card wasn't one I used regularly, so I didn't notice right away. But that doesn't mean this situation is acceptable at all. That's not the point. Give me back my money. Unable to contain my anger, I burst into tears and plead with him. Shut up. You're my wife, so you should just listen to what I say. You should be grateful I even married someone like you. With that, Tom suddenly slapped me across the face. What? Cool off outside. And don't bother coming back. This is the first time I've ever been hit by a man, and I'm in shock. I was so surprised that I couldn't move. A few moments later, the pain and fear hit me. I can't take it anymore. I finally decided to divorce him and leave this house. That night, I meticulously planned my next steps and went to bed. The next morning, Tom nonchalantly placed a single piece of paper in front of me. It was a divorce form. And Tom's section was already filled out. What? From now on, if you complain about me, we're getting divorced. If you don't want a divorce, then don't talk back to me. I'll handle the money from now on. With that, Tom grabbed the bank book and left for work. I couldn't believe how easily I had gotten the divorce form, which I thought would be the hardest part. Does he really think I still want to be with him after all he's done? Does he think the word divorce scares me? I realized that Tom's head is in the clouds. But for me, this is perfect. I'll gladly use this divorce form. All my love for Tom has completely disappeared. And then there's this. The investment trusts and stocks I've been working on since before I was married. There haven't been any major losses, and everything is going smoothly. I've reached a point where I can live off the returns alone. And with just the stock earnings, I've managed to save around $500,000. Of course, Tom doesn't know about this money, because it's in a different bank account. I was worried about keeping such a large sum of money in one account, so I have several. The bank book that Tom took is just one of them. I filled out my section of the divorce form. With the divorce form in hand, I quickly packed my bags and left the house. Then I went to the office and successfully submitted the divorce form. For the time being, I took refuge at my parents' house. Seeing me show up with a ton of luggage, my surprised parents listened as I explained the situation. While enjoying a leisurely stay at my parents' house, I started checking real estate listings. Commuting from my parents' house is too far, so I need to find a new place to live soon. Then, while browsing on my smartphone, I stumbled upon an interesting listing. A newly built house near the station. A perfect 15-minute walk from work. I immediately went to the real estate agency to inquire. The house is currently under construction and is expected to be completed in 2 months. The interior work hasn't started yet, so they said they can accommodate some of my requests. The location is great, and there are many interested buyers. I decided on the spot to buy the house and even completed the payment that day. I stayed at my parents' house while preparing for the move, and everything went smoothly. Hey, Jennifer. One day, out of the blue, my ex-husband spoke to me at the office. I had been so thrilled with the hustle and bustle since deciding on our new home that I had completely forgotten about him. Where the hell are you? Why aren't you answering your phone? I had received dozens, if not hundreds, of calls from Tom, but I had been ignoring them all along. And what about the divorce papers? I couldn't believe it and checked with the office, and they told me it's already been submitted. What the hell is going on? What do you mean, what's going on? You're the one who shoved those divorce papers at me. I just did as you told me to. Don't screw with me. There's no way they would accept divorce papers submitted without my consent. Tom had handed me the divorce papers himself. How selfish can he be? A divorce application submitted without my agreement won't be accepted. If I sue, you'll be charged with forgery. Serves you right. But you gave them to me, Tom. Your section is filled out by you. Even though I explained this, Tom wouldn't listen. I won't accept it. Employees passing by turned around at Tom's loud yelling inside the office. The divorce is already finalized. I've already reported it to the company. You should properly report it to your boss as well. I tried to distance myself from Tom. Then, he grabbed my arm tightly. I won't accept it, you hear me? I won't let you have it your way. You can't escape from me, he said in a low voice, and then he left. The new home was wonderful. My favorite room, furniture, and appliances. Being surrounded by my favorites filled my heart in ways I had forgotten since I used to dread going home. Being at home truly gives me peace of mind. Then, the doorbell rang. I looked at the monitor. But no one was there. Who is it? No answer. Suspicious, I looked around from the balcony. But no one was there. The next day, the company was closed, so I was eager to get started early in the morning. I'm going to clean up the house today. I was pumped up when I heard a loud knock on the door. Wondering what it was, I went outside, and there she was, my mother-in-law. To be precise, my former mother-in-law. What do you want? I asked. It's not a matter of what do you want. What are you thinking, moving out without discussing it with a family? She scolded. Huh? Had Tom not told his mom about us? Before that, how did she know where this house was? Then I remembered the doorbell ringing last night. Tom must have followed me and figured out my address. Didn't Tom tell you? We're divorced, I informed her. This is just a lover's quarrel. Withdraw the divorce right now, she insisted. If you don't withdraw it, I'll sue you for forging documents. Tom chimed in, out of nowhere. He was still saying such things? Why would that be the case? You are the one who wrote it, right? I was losing my patience. While Tom and I were talking, his mom had let herself into my house and was looking around. Well, this is a big house. Is it a duplex? With this size, maybe I could move in. She mused. Hey! Don't just enter without asking. I protested. Oh my, listen to you. Accusing your parent of being a thief. She retorted, unabashed. Tom and his mom were speaking as if they could say whatever they wanted. I kept my emotions in check and spoke calmly. The divorce is finalized. The divorce papers were indeed written by Tom. If you still insist on suing for document forgery, then let's settle this in court with lawyers. I proposed. Lawyers, court. These words seemed to finally make her grasp the situation. She looked unsettled but then said, well, if you two are getting divorced, this house belongs to Tom, right? He and I will live here. I was astounded. She had no understanding of Tom at all. Tom, with his low income and suspended credit cards, there's no way he could afford a house. This house is in my name. I bought it with my savings, I clarified. Hey! What do you mean by that? How can you afford to buy a house? Tom finally reacted. I told them both that I bought the house with the money I made from investments. Realizing that the house was not in Tom's name, his mother became furious. What is this all about? What are we supposed to do now? She demanded. There was a reason she was panicking. Upon hearing about the new house from Tom, she had sold the house they were living in. I was amazed that she could make such a bold move without even discussing living together with me. Well, even if she had asked, I wouldn't have agreed to live together. Fine, let's settle this in court. I will make sure to get that divorce withdrawn. I won't accept this divorce, she declared, storming off with Tom. Even if they did take this to court, the divorce papers were unmistakably written by Tom. And does he even have the money to hire a lawyer? I doubt it. Well, if I do get sued, I'll think about it then. Afterward, I continued to live peacefully alone in my home. A while passed without any issues, so I thought the matter was settled. However, Tom started coming to my house repeatedly, asking to get back together. Jennifer, I'm sorry for everything. Let's start over. He pleaded. I couldn't believe it. After everything he had said to me. Not knowing when Tom might lose his temper, I ignored all his calls and visits. But his actions escalated. Hey! You've got some nerve ignoring me. I'll break this window if you don't come out right now. He threatened. It was becoming more and more like harassment. He even started stalking me at work, calling incessantly, making it impossible for me to do my job. He would sometimes wait for me at the exit of my workplace or near my house. Scared, I started going home with a friend and asked my boss for help. It had gotten to a point where it was affecting my daily life, so I decided to consult the police. Subsequently, the police started patrolling around my home twice a day. During one of these patrols, they caught my ex-husband yelling outside my new house, and he was arrested on the spot. Stalking, harassment, and threats. He was found guilty of these criminal acts and was arrested. Of course, he was also fired from his job. He must be serving his time in prison by now. The rumor that my ex-mother-in-law's son had been arrested for making threats spread quickly through the neighborhood. My former mother-in-law, who used to socialize with the neighbors, couldn't even step outside her house anymore, so she moved far away. According to the grapevine, she now lives alone in a small, old, wooden apartment because she doesn't have her own house to return to. Finally free from all of this, I immediately contacted my parents. They had taken care of me back in the countryside, so I asked them if they wanted to live together in my new house, and they were delighted to join me. We weren't exactly wealthy, but they raised me with care. Now I finally have the chance to do something kind for my parents, and it makes me happy. Next, I'd like to invite my friends over for a barbecue or have drinks at my place. I've lived my life thinking that I just needed to endure things, but from now on, I want to take better care of myself and cherish every day. Your new house is on fire. Are you okay? Maybe you should call the fire department right away. I rushed to my home as soon as I got the call from my mother-in-law. I didn't want to believe it, but my house was on fire. Why on earth? Panicking, I called my mother-in-law again. Robert is sleeping in the room. Please call 911 right away. What? She was taken aback, not expecting my husband to be asleep inside. When I asked my mother-in-law about the fire, her response was totally unexpected. I got married 2 years ago and had our son, Jason, this year. Following his birth, we bought our dream home. Catherine, we finally got our dream home. I'm gonna work even harder now. That's Robert, my husband, always making me smile. We've got a hefty mortgage, so make sure you work hard. We joked and laughed together. Even after marriage and having a child, our bond remained strong and we shared jokes often. However, building a good relationship with my mother-in-law hasn't been easy. My mother-in-law has quite an animosity towards me. It's been like this ever since I first went to greet my in-laws after our engagement. Hello, I'm Catherine. I was nervous while introducing myself to my in-laws for the first time. Don't be so formal. Please take care of our Robert. It was my father-in-law who eased my tension. My father-in-law's a tall, broad-shouldered man but incredibly gentle and kind. You're the young lady who's here to steal our Robert away. My mother-in-law's words felt straight out of a soap opera. Mom. That's no way to speak. My husband defended me, pointing out his mother's behavior. What did you say, Robert? You're the son I raised with so much care, and she's trying to steal you. Just a remark from my husband set her off like this. I was genuinely shocked to see her react in such a way. I had heard from my husband that she was a bit too affectionate towards him, but I never expected it to be this intense. By the way, did you say Catherine? What do your parents do? My father passed away when I was little, and my mother works as a nurse. I followed in her footsteps and work as a nurse as well. So, you were raised by a single parent. I can't trust Robert to someone who probably didn't receive enough love. That's incredibly rude to say, especially upon our first meeting. Sure, I was raised by a single mother, but I believe I was brought up with all the love I needed. If she keeps belittling my mother like this, I might as well leave. Just as I had that thought, my husband stood up. Enough is enough. No matter what you say, Mom, I'm gonna marry Catherine. If you're against our marriage, so be it. But if you try to interfere with our plans any further, I'll cut ties with you. Robert, why would you say something like that? You're abandoning me. Catherine, let's go. My husband and I left, leaving behind my dramatically crying mother-in-law, and after saying our goodbyes to my father-in-law, we departed from their home. I'll get Robert back. Just as we were about to step out of their front door, I had a feeling that my mother-in-law said something. Feeling scared, I decided to just ignore it. It seemed like what my husband told my mother-in-law really hit home because she stayed quiet and didn't interfere with our wedding plans thereafter. 6 months into our marriage, I found out I was pregnant and we visited my in-laws to share the news. My father-in-law was thrilled, but my mother-in-law started with her sarcastic remarks again. It's hard to believe someone raised by a single parent is having a child. Do you even know how to love properly? My mother-in-law still assumes that since I was raised by a single parent, I must not have received enough love. If I hadn't been loved, I would have gone off the rails a long time ago. I was tempted to tell her just that, but held my tongue. Since you're pregnant, Catherine, what did you do about your nursing job? Did you quit? No, I didn't quit. I'm on maternity leave. You're not gonna dump all the housework on Robert, are you? I'm not gonna dump everything on him. Robert said he'd help out, so we're planning on sharing the chores. See? You're gonna make Robert do everything. It's sad he'll have to come home tired from work and then be expected to do household chores. At my mother-in-law's comment, my husband was so taken aback that he was rendered speechless. Hey, just let it be. Both Catherine and Robert seem uncomfortable. My mother-in-law looked like she wanted to say more, but my father-in-law's words finally silenced her. When the baby is born, please bring him over. My father-in-law said with a gentle smile. Of course. I'm looking forward to bringing them over. 8 months later, with my husband's support, I was able to safely give birth to our son, Jason. A year after that, we decided to buy our own home, even though it might have seemed a bit early. We figured if we're gonna take out a mortgage, might as well start repaying it sooner rather than later. To celebrate our new home and my son's first birthday, we invited my in-laws over for a modest dinner. Wow! What a lovely house! Congrats on the new home! And happy first birthday, Jason! My father-in-law praised our home and acknowledged Jason. However, my mother-in-law seemed displeased and didn't say anything as she entered our home. Thank you for coming over today. Really now? Why do we have to come all the way here for you and my grandchild? The only good thing is getting to see Robert. While my mother-in-law grumbled, she took a seat on the living room couch. Mom, please, don't say things like that. Let's just enjoy the meal. With my husband's calming words, the dinner began. For a while, we had a pleasant time. Suddenly, my son started to cry, and the room became noisy. What's the matter, little guy? Hungry? I rushed over to my son, trying to soothe him. But he wouldn't stop crying. Stop that incessant crying. Quiet him down. My mother-in-law shouted out of the blue. Enough already. Is he crying because he lacks your love? Can't even calm down your own son, no wonder I didn't want Robert to marry you. She continued to belittle me for being a single parent. I was at my wit's end and snapped back at my mother-in-law. It's not about love. Babies cry because that's their way of communicating. And what's your problem with him crying? If you can't stand it, just leave. If you're gonna be like that, I will leave. I've seen Robert, and that's enough. Robert, if you stay with this worthless woman, you'll end up worthless too. You can always come home. My mother-in-law, in a huff, took my father-in-law and left. It's crazy to even yell at our son like that. I felt relieved when she left. Sorry about today. My mom was really out of line. To be honest, I never thought she'd yell at her grandson. It might sound harsh, but maybe we shouldn't see my folks for a while? It seemed my husband felt the same way I did. To be honest, I was thinking about telling him that I wanted to distance ourselves from them for a while. Yeah, let's take a break from them for a bit. We talked it out, and both being exhausted, we decided to call it a night. 3 days later, my phone rang. It was my mother-in-law. Hello? I'm truly sorry about the other day. I shouldn't have yelled at Jason. How about coming over to my place as a peace offering? I've prepared dinner. My husband won't be there, but please stay a while. My mother-in-law sounded much kinder than usual. I found this new side of her a bit unsettling, but I felt it would be rude to refuse, so I decided to head over to my in-laws' house. All right. I'll bring Jason along. After about a 30-minute drive, I arrived at my in-laws' house and rang the doorbell. But no one answered. Is my mother-in-law not home? Just then, my phone rang again. It was her. Hello? I'm at your house, where are you? Your new house is on fire. Maybe you should call the fire department? After telling me that, she hung up. My house is on fire? What on earth is going on? Before I could process this, she sent a picture to my phone. There was no mistaking it, that was my house. Frantically, I tried calling her back. But she wouldn't answer. Oh no. Robert is still at home. I kept trying to get a hold of her. As time ticked by, 10 minutes had already passed. If that photo was real, my husband could be in danger. My husband had left for work in the morning but had come home early due to feeling ill. He was resting in our bedroom upstairs. Just as I thought about ignoring my mother-in-law and heading home, I got a call back from my mother-in-law. Hello? Why are you calling repeatedly? What's going on? Is it true that my house is on fire? That's what I told you, didn't I? I even sent you a picture, right? My mother-in-law. Where are you now? Call 911 immediately. Don't be so alarmed. I'm sure the neighbors have already reported it. How can she be so nonchalant about this? Even if it's your son's house burning. Normally, my husband would be at work at this hour. But my mother-in-law probably didn't know he'd come home early because he felt sick. I was furious at my mother-in-law's apparent lack of intent to call the fire department. If we leave it like this, my husband might get caught in the fire and never come back. My mother-in-law, listen to me. Robert is sleeping in our burning house right now. If we don't do something, Robert might die. I still couldn't believe there was a fire, but I tried to explain it calmly to her. What? Are you kidding? Why is Robert in the house? Why? Robert! Robert! As soon as I told her that my husband was sleeping inside the blazing house, my mother-in-law started to panic. She seemed really shaken, unable to converse properly and looking utterly lost. Please, calm down. Okay? Call the firefighters first. I'm gonna head there right away. If you're still near our place, go from house to house and ask the neighbors to evacuate. I told my mother-in-law to prioritize saving lives. Working as a nurse, I've seen many people brought in for emergencies. Most of those brought in from fires are too late, their lungs scorched and unable to breathe. Once it gets to that point, it's too late. Some people might have noticed our house is on fire, but others might not have. Yet, she was panicking, unsure of what to do, asking me for guidance. That's why I'm saying I'm gonna head home now, so prioritize saving lives. I must have been agitated as well. Usually, no matter what she'd say, I'd never talk back so forcefully. But now, if I didn't get her to act, my husband could die. It's okay even if the house is totally burned down. But if my husband were to die, he'd never come back. With that thought in mind, I yelled at my panicking mother-in-law over the phone and hung up on her. I can't say I don't understand her feelings, thinking her own son might die and being so distraught she can't act. I doubt I'd be any more composed if I were in her shoes. But panicking forever won't save Robert. My husband's okay, right? But what if something happened? Overwhelmed with anxiety and fear, I hurriedly drove to our house. After about a 30-minute drive, I finally reached our place from my in-laws' house. Our home was completely engulfed in roaring flames, leaving hardly any trace behind.
Please, make way! Excuse me! Move, please!
Amidst all this, I could hear paramedics carrying someone on a stretcher. It must be my husband. Thinking that, I approached the paramedics. He might have been burned beyond recognition.
Excuse me. I live here. Is the person you're carrying from this house?
When I asked with a trembling voice, they let me see the person on the stretcher. My worst fears were confirmed. It was my husband being carried out.
Robert! Robert! Answer me!
My husband, lying on the stretcher, had burns all over his body, and it was impossible to tell if he was alive or not. I wanted to accompany my husband in the ambulance, but I was told that I needed to be present for the scene investigation, so I couldn't. My mother-in-law was questioned as the first one to discover the fire. After about an hour of investigation at the scene, I was finally let go and immediately headed to the hospital with our son. At the reception, I was told he was in a private room. Without delay, I went straight there.
Robert! This can't be real!
Entering the room, I whispered to myself. My husband was wrapped in bandages from head to toe, lying completely still. My husband's gone. I couldn't help but break down, clinging to him.
Why did this happen? Robert! Answer me!
It hurts. Please let go. Don't just assume I'm dead. Even though his voice was weak, my husband spoke those words. I had thought my husband was gone for good, but he was alive. In my overwhelming joy, I hugged him tighter than I should have.
I really thought you were gone. I'm so glad you're alive.
My husband's doctor said that while the burns were severe, his life was not in immediate danger. With some time in the hospital and treatment, he'd be able to return to everyday life. However, I was also told that the particularly severe burns on his left side might leave some lasting effects. My husband probably didn't want to believe that there might be lingering effects. But for me, just knowing that he was alive was a blessing. Just the thought of possibly losing my husband was too much for me to bear. That night, I was allowed to stay in my husband's hospital room. The next day, I couldn't help but think about the phone call from my mother-in-law the day before about the fire. Normally, if her son's house was on fire, she'd call 911 before letting me know. Moreover, when I went to her house after being called by her, she was nowhere to be found, and she was the one who reported our house fire. I didn't want to consider the possibility, but thinking this, I headed to her house after giving her a call. My father-in-law and mother-in-law welcomed me in, and we began to discuss the events of the previous day. How's Robert doing? Well, the burns are bad, but his life isn't in danger. However, there might be some lasting effects. When I said this, my mother-in-law covered her face with her hands. I couldn't read her expression, but she was clearly shaken. Feeling suspicious, I discreetly turned on my cell phone's voice recorder. I'm gonna ask you straight up. I came to this house yesterday after you called me. But there was no sign of you or your car, and there was no response when I rang the doorbell. You told me about the fire at our house, right? How did you know about the fire at our house, which is a 30-minute drive from here? It was just a coincidence. I thought I'd pick you guys up and was heading your way. But I told you on the phone I was coming over, right? Why didn't you tell me then that you were coming to pick us up? I thought of it after hanging up the phone. Things like that happen, don't they? I see. But why didn't you call 911 before telling me? Normally, if your son's house is on fire, you'd call 911 right away. But you didn't do anything until I told you Robert was asleep inside. You didn't set the fire, did you? I had always had a suspicion that my mother-in-law might have been responsible for the fire. Honestly, I wanted her to firmly deny it. But after I asked, my mother-in-law went silent. Hey, Catherine's asking you something. How about giving her an answer? My father-in-law urged his silent and frozen mother-in-law to reply. It's not your fault. Until now, my mother-in-law, who had been silent, began to speak slowly. Catherine.
Because you're taking Robert away from me. I thought if the house burned down, your relationship would sour and he'd come back to me. But I never imagined Robert would be asleep.
I wanted to deny it. But my hopes were quickly shattered. So, my mother-in-law was the arsonist after all. I can't believe you actually started the fire, my mother-in-law. I've recorded what you just said on a voice recorder. I'm taking this to the police. I showed my mother-in-law my phone displaying the voice recording app, asserting my intention to report her.
To be honest, I'm relieved my husband's alive. But what were you gonna do if he had burned alive? You would have killed your beloved son.
I'm sorry. The moment my mother-in-law apologized in a weak voice.
You've gotta be kidding me. You idiot. What have you done?
Usually a gentle father-in-law, he looked like he was possessed as he slapped her hard.
You caused trouble for others and even try to kill your own son. I was a fool to marry someone like you. I don't ever want to see your face again. We're getting divorced today. What? No, please.
The sudden divorce declaration from my father-in-law left my mother-in-law in shock. She had no words to say and just looked down.
You're not saying anything, so I take it you agree with the divorce? Then get the hell out now. I'm sorry. I truly am. I regret it. Please, don't divorce me. Don't abandon me.
My mother-in-law begged my father-in-law, crying.
Don't abandon you? You think I'm nice enough to live with someone like you? You almost burned down someone else's house along with your own son.
Pushing aside the pleading mother-in-law, my father-in-law continued yelling. My father-in-law was absolutely right.
Mother-in-law, considering what you've done, it's no wonder father-in-law wants to divorce you. You might be facing many years, perhaps decades in prison.
Those words silenced my mother-in-law completely. Perhaps she hadn't realized the gravity of her actions and that she could be sentenced to prison. Collapsing to her knees, my mother-in-law hung her head, looking completely drained and lacking the usual energy to make snide comments. I'll be on my way now. Take care in prison. After leaving my in-laws' house, I headed straight to the police station and submitted the voice recording as evidence. That recording became the definitive evidence, and my mother-in-law was arrested without delay that very day. After all the times she berated me, saying a child from a single-parent home lacks love, who's the one lacking love now? Burning down the brand-new house her son had worked so hard to buy. Moreover, she almost killed her beloved son with her own hands. There's no reason for someone like you, who could casually set fire to her son's house, to talk to me about love. Reflect on your actions for the rest of your life in prison. Looking at our burnt-down house, that's what I thought. Having lost our home, while my husband was hospitalized, we stayed with my parents' house. It's been a long time since I've been at my parents' house. We've decided to rent an apartment when my husband gets discharged, so for now, I'll just lean on my mother. A month later, my mother-in-law was charged with arson and was sentenced to life imprisonment. Because she got a life sentence, we weren't gonna get any compensation or medical expenses for my husband, but for me, never having to see her again was a bigger relief. Thankfully, my husband was recovering, and he didn't have any lasting injuries. The burn scars are still raw, but the doctor said they'd heal over time. Then, a week later, my husband got discharged. Hey, can we stop by my folks' place before heading to the new apartment? My husband asked, and so we decided to visit my in-laws' house before moving into our new place.
Catherine, Robert. I'm truly sorry.
As soon as we entered the house, my father-in-law apologized immediately.
I've divorced my wife. she'll pay for her sins in prison on her own. I already told Robert over the phone.
Saying that, he handed me a sizable bag. It's a new place, and you probably had a mortgage. I'm not sure if the insurance will cover the fire since my ex-wife was responsible. It might not be much, but please accept this. When I looked inside the bag, there was about $300,000.
I can't accept this much.
I was floored by the amount, but I refused to accept it.
Please, won't you take it? I feel it's still not enough. She did it, but as her husband, I feel responsible too. Please.
I didn't up for it, but I gave in to my father-in-law's pleas and accepted it. All right, Dad. See ya. As Robert and I were about to leave, his father stopped us.
Catherine, I know it might bring back memories, but could you bring Jason and visit once in a while? It might be selfish of me to ask this.
Of course, we'll visit. It's not selfish at all. Please spend time with Jason. I replied, and my father-in-law looked apologetically with tears.
Our dream home was destroyed because of my mother-in-law, but we decided to start fresh and work hard as a family. Hoping that one day, we'd have our dream home again with everyone.
The car came to a sudden halt. Pulling over to the shoulder, Jake got out of the driver's seat and violently opened the door to the back seat where I was sitting. Looking up, I saw Jake's expression was unnaturally cold.
Get out!
Not understanding the meaning of his words, I couldn't respond, and then Jake grabbed my arm and pulled.
I said get out! Ouch! Stop it!
Forcefully dragged out of the car, I lost my balance and fell onto the road. As I was trying to comprehend Jake's sudden and aggressive actions, my belongings were thrown in front of me.
Ruining our day off with your water breaking, wasting our time like that.
Jake gave me a cold stare. I couldn't understand what was happening. As I endured the pain, clutching my stomach, Emily, who had come down from the passenger seat, whispered in my ear.
This is your punishment for stealing Dad from me.
Stunned by her harsh words, I looked at Emily's face.
We're going on a trip, just the two of us. I couldn't care less about what happens to you.
Emily smirked, called out let's go to Jake, and went back to the car. Without saying a word, Jake glanced at me, got back in the driver's seat. And they drove away, leaving me behind. My name is Kate. I'm a housewife, currently 8 months pregnant. I married Jake a year and a half ago. Jake is divorced, and he has custody of his child from his previous marriage, Emily. Emily, a middle school student at the time, was going through a sensitive phase and only talked to me when absolutely necessary. She seemed to get along well with Jake, openly showing affection to him, which he happily reciprocated. Being an only child, I wasn't sure how to communicate with younger people and didn't know the appropriate distance to keep from Emily, but I thought we could slowly close the gap over time. After all, we had plenty of time. Or so I thought. Our relationship changed dramatically when I found out I was pregnant. A visit to the hospital confirmed that I was 3 months pregnant. Overjoyed to be expecting, I was ecstatic. I decided to share the news with Jake and Emily at dinner that night.
Jake, Emily, I'm pregnant.
Jake's face lit up. You're pregnant? That's great, he exclaimed, sounding truly happy.
Yes, I'm so happy to be expecting our child.
Turning to Emily, I saw that she was staring at me. It wasn't her usual indifferent expression, she seemed to be frowning slightly and gritting her teeth. I immediately regretted my thoughtless words. I had intended to treat Emily like my own child. That's why, no matter how distant she was, I tried to interact with her as usual. But from Emily's perspective, my pregnancy might have made her feel left out of the family. And my words about expecting our child could have made her feel even more excluded.
Emily, you're going to have a little brother or sister. You'll take good care of them, won't you?
Trying not to let my panic show, I spoke to Emily. Whether she understood or not, she simply said okay, and went to her room. I'm sorry, I said something insensitive to Emily.
It might have been a delicate topic. But Emily will understand it eventually.
That day, Emily didn't come out of her room. The next day, Emily came into the living room a bit later than usual. There was a slightly awkward atmosphere. I greeted Emily as usual.
Good morning, Emily. Breakfast is ready.
Emily glanced at the breakfast on the table in silence. She took her seat, and as soon as she took a bite, she uttered words of surprise.
This is terrible. Huh? I said it's terrible. I've always thought that, but you're not good at cooking, right? Being forced to eat this every day is nothing but painful.
Emily said so and left her seat.
Oh, the lunchbox. Did you hear what I just said? I don't need the lunchbox. Give me some money instead.
I simply stared at Emily's outstretched hand. If I were her real parent, what would be the right thing to do in this situation? I took a $5 from my wallet and placed it on her hand.
Just $5? Well, whatever.
She muttered softly and left the house. That evening, I was debating whether to tell Jake about this morning's events. Jake leaves for work earlier than Emily, so he doesn't know what happened this morning. Emily didn't come out of her room. I didn't want to eat the meal I made for myself, so I put hot water in a cup ramen noodle container and took it to my room. I planned to have it for dinner today. After returning home, Jake was puzzled by Emily's absence in the living room.
What happened to Emily?
Jake looked around nervously. I was still hesitating. If Jake told Emily what he had heard from me, Emily might think I had tattled on her. If that happened, our relationship could deteriorate even further. I couldn't even determine what was the right thing to do.
She's not feeling well today, so she's going to rest early.
I decided to lie. Sure enough, Jake expressed concern about Emily's condition and said he would check on her in her room. Since she should be sleeping by now, I prepared dinner. I sat at the seat opposite to Jake, slowly rubbing my stomach, thinking about what I should do next. The next morning, when Emily woke up, Jake was about to leave for work at the front door. I was there too, planning to see him off.
Emily, you didn't seem well last night. Are you okay?
Jake looked at me with a puzzled expression. Then, after furrowing his brows at me for a moment, he turned to Jake and smiled, saying, "Yeah, I'm fine. Sorry for worrying you."
I see, that's good. But don't push yourself too hard, okay?
With a relieved expression, Jake left the house. As Emily waved goodbye to Jake, she gave me a sharp look as soon as the door closed.
Why are you pretending to be such a nice person? What do you mean?
I asked Emily, not understanding the meaning behind her words.
Why didn't you just tell Dad the truth? That Emily said mean things to you, and you were hurt. Even if you try to please me, I won't accept you.
With a huff, Emily turned her back to me and headed for the bathroom. Certainly, I had hurt Emily. However, would it lead to this? She's at a difficult age, and I thought time might resolve it, but maybe it's not that simple. I was left feeling unsure of what to do, trapped in a state of confusion. As my morning sickness subsided and I entered the final month of pregnancy, I invited my in-laws over for tea. My in-laws were very kind to me and showed concern for my well-being.
I'm sorry for coming to your house during such a difficult time. But we wanted to meet you and have a chat before it gets even more challenging after the baby arrives, my mother-in-law said. No problem at all. I'm happy to meet you, Mr. and Mrs. Johnson. Have you been doing well? I inquired. We've been doing fine. If you ever run into any troubles, don't hesitate to ask for our help, my father-in-law added.
Despite the kind words, Emily's attitude towards me remained unchanged. During the times when Jake wasn't around, she continued to berate me with stronger words than before.
You never seem to improve your cooking skills. What kind of nerve do you have to feed your family this garbage? Don't wander around with your big body in front of me. You're an eyesore. You're not even part of this family. Don't stick your nose into what I'm doing.
I was subjected to such words every day, and gradually, it felt like my heart was losing its sensation. I no longer felt hurt as I did initially. It seemed that Jake, although he didn't confront me directly, sensed that our relationship wasn't going well, and he focused on keeping Emily in a good mood. One day, when Jake came home drunk and told me, "You're to blame for upsetting Emily," I realized that I couldn't rely on him anymore. If I could endure it alone, I decided to continue doing so. However, if something happened that targeted the child I was about to give birth to, that was my only concern at the moment.
Kate, are you okay?
My mother-in-law called out to me, and I suddenly snapped back to reality. When I looked up, I saw the worried faces of my in-laws looking at me.
I'm sorry, I'm fine. My stomach feels heavy, and I couldn't sleep well last night. If you ever face any difficulties, don't hesitate to ask for our help. We're really grateful to you, Kay, for marrying our son, who is divorced and has a child.
Jake's divorce was due to his mounting debts. He had borrowed money repeatedly to satisfy Emily's demands, and his ex-wife couldn't bear it anymore, so she initiated the divorce. Jake's salary alone wasn't enough to repay the debt, and I heard that my in-laws had stepped in to help. They were still paying off the debt in installments, but my in-laws were delighted that Jake remarried me. They also expressed their worry and promised to support us if anything happened. Having such kind in-laws, I felt happy. I smiled, thinking that I shouldn't make them worry any further. About a week before the expected due date. It was a Saturday. Jake and Emily were both relaxing at home. They sat side by side on the couch, seeming to get along, but I didn't have a place in their conversation. I sat at the dining table a little away, sipping on caffeine-free tea, absent-mindedly watching their interaction. Then, I felt an uncomfortable sensation in my abdomen. I paled in an instant. Could it be labor? At first, I thought it might be my imagination, so I tried to calm myself by sipping more tea. However, the same abdominal pains struck again. There was no mistaking it. Labor was coming. I realized it with certainty and decided to inform Jake and Emily, intending to endure the pain. But just as I was about to call out to them, I felt a sensation of my lower body getting wet. My water broke. Panic overcame me. "Jake, Emily. I think my water broke," I weakly uttered. Jake immediately said. With their faces turned toward me, my two companions reacted. "I'll get the car ready," and Emily said.
"I've prepared the bags. I'll take them to the car."
While I changed my clothes, the two of them swiftly prepared everything. I got into the car with Jake driving, me in the back seat, and Emily in the front passenger seat. Looking back now, I should have noticed something was off right here. It was unnatural for them to be so considerate of me, even carrying my luggage, given their attitudes up to this point. But at that moment, I was so shaken up by the initial contractions and my water breaking that I didn't feel any sense of discomfort. The OB/GYN clinic I usually go to is about a 15-minute drive away. It's a well-known hospital around these parts, so Jake knew where it was. I was trying to calm myself down while enduring the pain and looking down. But even after about 15 minutes, the car showed no signs of stopping. Feeling something was wrong, I looked out the window and saw an unfamiliar landscape. It seemed like we were going up a mountain road, with fewer and fewer houses around. There wasn't supposed to be a place like this on the way to the hospital.
"Hey, Jake, where are we? This doesn't seem like the way to the hospital."
Jake didn't respond. Emily stayed silent too.
"Jake? Emily?"
The car didn't seem like it was going to stop. The contractions were getting worse.
"Both of you, please listen. The pain is getting stronger. We need to get to the hospital quickly, or the baby."
The car suddenly came to a screeching halt. Jake parked the car on the shoulder, got out of the driver's seat, and roughly opened the door to the back seat where I was sitting. Looking up, Jake's expression seemed unusually cold.
"Get out."
Not understanding what he meant, I couldn't respond. Then Jake grabbed my arm and pulled.
"I said get out." "Ow! Stop it!"
He forcefully dragged me out of the car, and I lost my balance and fell onto the road. Before I could comprehend Jake's sudden aggressive behavior, my luggage was thrown in front of me.
"Ruining our day off with your water breaking, wasting our time like that."
Jake looked at me with a cold gaze. I couldn't understand what was happening.
Jake, why are you doing this? Please, take me to the hospital. Don't you care what happens to our baby? That baby isn't mine. Why should I care?
Jake's words echoed in my head. Did he just say it's not his child? What is he talking about?
Emily told me. You've been cheating, haven't you?
I looked at Emily. She was smirking maliciously and glanced at me from the corner of her eye.
The baby you're carrying is from your lover, isn't it? You couldn't possibly love it, even if it's born. I have no obligation to help. Wait, this child is truly yours. I didn't cheat. So you're saying Emily lied to me? That's impossible. I can't believe you'd try to demean your own daughter just because you don't like Emily.
All sorts of thoughts raced through my mind. I couldn't believe Emily would go this far. How can I save my baby? I need to clear up Jake's misunderstanding. As I endured the pain without speaking, Jake hurled more abusive words at me.
You betrayed us first. This is all your own doing.
I realized that talking to Jake was probably pointless. He'd do anything to stay in Emily's good graces. No matter what I said, he probably wouldn't believe me. I needed to figure out a way to protect my baby on my own. As I held my belly and endured the agony, Emily, who had gotten out of the car, spoke into my ear.
This is your punishment for stealing Dad from me.
Her words were like a final blow. I looked at Emily's face.
We're going on a trip, just the two of us. I couldn't care less what happens to you.
Emily flashed a sly smile, called out to Jake, "Hurry up, let's go," and went back to the car. Without saying a word, Jake shot me a quick glance and climbed into the driver's seat. Leaving me behind, the two of them drove away in the car. Luckily, my cell phone was inside the bag that was thrown out. I tried to call for an ambulance, but I was out of the service area and couldn't get through. Thinking that I had to somehow make it down the mountain, I staggered to my feet and started to walk down the slope, one step at a time. Along the way, a local happened to pass by and offered to give me a ride down the mountain. Grateful for my good fortune, once I got to a place with cell service, I called someone. I couldn't forgive the two of them for abandoning me and putting my baby in danger. Enduring the labor pains, I swore in my heart that I would get my revenge. 2 hours later. Thanks to a kind person, I was at a nearby hospital, getting ready to give birth. It seemed like it would be a while before the birth, so I lay in bed, trying to find a comfortable position. Then, my cell phone vibrated. Emily's name was displayed on the screen. When I answered the call, Emily shouted in a piercing voice.
What the hell did you do?
Who are you?
What? What are you joking about? I'm your daughter, Emily.
I don't have a daughter.
Stop joking around. Because of you, I might not be able to go to high school.
I couldn't help but smile when I realized that they were already on the move.
What do you mean by that? Explain yourself. From the way you're acting, did you get a call from Grandma or Grandpa? Yeah. They told me they won't be helping those people who treat our family badly anymore. What does help even mean? Why can't I go to high school because of this?
It seemed like Jake hadn't told Emily anything. Maybe his generosity was just a front, wanting to show off. Do you know what caused Jake's divorce?
Mom's affair, right? That's why I chose to live with Dad. He's lying about that. The real reason for the divorce was Jake's debts.
Emily fell silent on the other end of the line. Was she that shocked to find out her father had lied to her?
What? Dad lied to me? That's right. Jake said he couldn't pay off his debts with his salary alone, so your grandparents stepped in to help pay them back. That can't be right. Dad earns enough to buy me anything I want, doesn't he? I think his salary is average, but it's not high enough to easily buy a high schooler luxurious bags and clothes and pay private high school tuition without taking out a loan.
Emily seemed to be confronting Jake right next to her. I couldn't hear clearly, but I could hear shouting.
Hey! What the hell is this all about?
Now Jake was on the phone. Clearly furious. What do you mean, what's this all about? I just told the truth. There's no need to tell Emily things I haven't told her myself, creating stories that aren't true. I only told her because she wanted to know the situation. Isn't it your fault for keeping it a secret? You. Getting all high and mighty on me. Maybe it was because we weren't face to face, or perhaps my feelings had cooled down. But I wasn't scared even though Jake was yelling. I even felt pity for him, being able to do nothing but shout. Kate, could you please hand me the phone? My father-in-law took the phone from me and started talking to Jake. I called my in-laws from the mountain road, informing them that I was heading to the nearby hospital. They said they would come right away, rushing over to check on me. Jake, is that you? What? Dad? I've heard everything from Kate. Cancel your trip and come straight home, we need to talk. But I can't just. Emily is looking forward to the trip. This is not the time for that. You said you've been repaying the debt we helped you with monthly, but you haven't paid a dime. We need to have a serious talk about that. Okay, I understand. I'll head over as soon as possible. Sighing deeply, my father-in-law handed me back my cell phone. I'm sorry to bother you during such a tough time, Kate. No, I'm really grateful that you came. I've brought the stuff you asked for as well. My mother-in-law handed me a piece of paper, making its contents visible to me. Taking it, I sighed again. Thank you. I'm sorry. We are the ones who should be apologizing. We're sorry for putting you in such a dangerous situation. As my in-laws bowed their heads together, I told them to stop. Right now, I'm just praying for a healthy baby to be born. Since we don't know when those two will come home, we are going to leave. Thank you. I'll contact you once I know if I can transfer to my usual hospital. Thank you, they said, and then my in-laws left. What I need to do now is give birth safely. The intervals between my contractions are getting shorter. I'll be meeting my baby very soon. The delivery was safe, and a healthy baby boy was born. I was relieved from the bottom of my heart when the doctor told me that there were no problems at all. Exhausted, I checked my cell phone the next day and found a rather long email from my mother-in-law. Last night, Jake and Emily visited their parents' house. There, my in-laws explained Jake's reason for the divorce and told Emily that her selfishness also contributed to the increasing debt. Emily, unaware of the debt, blamed and berated Jake. As Jake became disheartened under Emily's scolding, my in-laws pressed further. We can't trust you anymore. Pay back the debt we've been covering for you in one lump sum. But I can't pay it all at once, I don't even have savings. It's your own fault for not paying back a single dime and always taking advantage of us. Please! I'll pay it back monthly, just let me pay in installments. You've only got yourself to blame for not being trustworthy. We've lost all desire to help you after what you did to Kate. Despite their desperate pleas, asserting that they were not to blame, my father-in-law remained unmoved. And then, the document I had entrusted to my mother-in-law dealt the final blow. Kate has entrusted this to me. Fill it out right here, right now. This is a divorce form. Why do you have this? It's what Kate wants. She can't live with you two after you put her and the baby in danger. If Kate can't forgive you, neither can we. Although Jake was reluctant to divorce, he eventually gave in and filled out the form on the spot. I felt sorry for burdening my in-laws with such a difficult task, but I might not have been able to divorce so smoothly on my own. I felt grateful to my cooperative in-laws once again. 1 month after the birth. It happened when I visited my usual OB/GYN clinic for a regular checkup. Jake appeared before me. Kate! I've finally found you! Looking slightly haggard, I responded to Jake with a calm demeanor. What do you want? The divorce has already been finalized. What do you want now? Don't be so cold. Is that my child? As Jake tried to approach the child, I stepped back. You were the one who said it wasn't your child. Stay away. What do you want anyway? Jake stood up straight on the spot, seemingly shocked by my words, but then he started to apologize loudly.
Please, give us another chance. What are you talking about now? I can't live with someone who wouldn't help me when things got tough. Getting back together is out of the question. I guess you're right. So, could you at least lend me some money?
I was dumbfounded by his words, true to his nature until the very end. I knew my in-laws had told him to repay the debt they had been covering, but his lack of planning was astonishing.
I can't lend money to someone who spends without thinking ahead. I need money to raise this child. It's impossible. Please! Think of it as helping me and Emily.
Jake kept apologizing, completely unabashed by the bystanders. That's when my in-laws, who had accompanied me to the appointment, stepped in. What are you doing, ambushing her like this?
Dad! Why are you here? That's our line. We told you to stay away from Kate and our house. Did we not? But I can't make ends meet, and I thought Kate could help. Stop making excuses. If you come near Kate again, we will call the police. And then, you and Emily will be disowned.
Without giving Jake a chance to respond, my in-laws turned him away. Realizing he had no other options, Jake silently stood up and left. I watched him leave with a bitter feeling in my heart. Even after the divorce, I kept in touch with my in-laws. We would contact each other regularly, and they seemed happy to see their grandchild's face. According to them, Jake and Emily were having a tough time. In the end, Jake couldn't pay off the debt in a lump sum and decided to repay it in installments. Since we've talked about cutting ties, if there's even a single late repayment, he'll surely be desperate to pay back from now on. Emily had to drop out of high school because Jake's income alone wasn't enough to cover both the debt repayment and tuition fees. The in-laws were torn about this decision but decided to be strict to make her understand the gravity of her actions. She seems to have started working part-time since she couldn't find a full-time job, but her selfish nature made it hard to keep the job, and she's now mentally drained. Unable to spend as freely as before, the two of them are now living a frugal life. I do feel bad for causing the in-laws so much trouble, but all I can do is pray that Jake and Emily will somehow turn their lives around and become decent people. As for me, I've moved back to my family home far away and am living with my son. My parents have warmly welcomed me back, and they are overjoyed to live with their grandson. I hope my son grows up to be a considerate person. And with the help of the kind people around us, I want us to live a happy life together. Even though I married Keith, I didn't get along well with my mother-in-law and her son, Shane. However, one day, through Shane, my mother-in-law invited me to go to Hawaii. I thought that through this trip, maybe I could get closer to them. I greeted the day with such faint hope. Before boarding, I entrusted my wallet to my mother-in-law, and then she handed me divorce papers.
What? Why? It's because you can't get along with Shane and me, right? Keith complained about you a lot.
He's fed up, you know. My mother-in-law sneered at me, who was in a daze, and then went to the boarding gate with my wallet. I looked at the divorce paper in disbelief, and my eyes widened. This is Shane's handwriting. I felt a surge of intense anger.
Enjoy my time with my real family. The fake mom can just sleep outside.
I replied with a smile to Shane, who sneered at me. Okay. Until now, I've been patient because I was a part of Keith's family. But I'm done. I will make them regret trampling on my feelings. I am Macy, a 50-year-old housewife. I work as a florist and, using my qualification in flower coordination, I also undertake decorating event venues and wedding reception halls. I divorced 10 years ago due to my husband's infidelity, and thought I was done with marriage, but then I met Keith, who runs an event planning company, 3 years ago and remarried him after a year of dating. Unlike my previous husband, Keith is not good at small talk and is not a fan of forced smiles, but he is sincere and serious. For me, who has lost both of my parents, he is a reassuring and important person when we are together. I cherish these happy days, but there was one thing that bothered me. Shane, the child from his previous marriage, still hasn't opened up to me. Of course, I tried to make an effort. As the person in charge of cooking, I first understood his food preferences, and to create common topics of conversation, I bought CDs of his favorite band and listened to them enough to be able to sing them at karaoke. If he mentioned a drama he watched, I watched the same drama, and when I heard that a lottery for his favorite streaming service started at a convenience store, I drew a lottery and gave him the prize as a gift. But it seems all of them missed the mark. You know, stop trying to win me over. I was truly shocked when he said this to me.
I'm not trying to win you over. I just want to get along.
When I pleaded, Shane grimaced deeply.
I'm not planning on becoming a family with you. Just leave me alone.
His dismissive tone stabbed me like a knife. What makes matters worse is that Shane acts friendly towards me in front of Keith. Come to think of it, even before we got married, when we went out together several times, Shane showed a friendly smile and talked to me in a friendly manner. So I was under the impression that we would get along after marriage. I was prepared that it would be difficult for an adult child to call me mom, but when Keith was not around, Shane called me even worse.
Hey, old lady. Refill the water in the fridge. Where are my socks?
He seems to switch between names depending on his mood.
You know, when are you going to learn our family's taste? My deceased mom was a much better cook. It's so annoying that you act like a mom even though you can't even cook properly.
He constantly nagged and made sarcastic remarks, so I couldn't take it anymore and asked him.
Shane, if there is anything I'm lacking, please tell me. I'll try to improve.
Then Shane, with a twisted smile, said,
Think for yourself. You've got a brain, don't you? It's because you're so stupid that you get cheated on.
He snapped at me as I fell silent.
You're just after Dad's money, aren't you? He should have chosen a younger and prettier woman. I really don't see what he sees in you.
I couldn't come up with a response when he pointed out my appearance. It's still a mystery to me why Keith, an actor-like figure, even if only an acquaintance through work, asked me out. One day, I overheard a conversation between Shane and his friend and learned that Shane had quit college and was just drifting around.
Shane told me he needed $5,000 for a training program, so I lent it to him.
Huh?
Did I say that? You haven't told your dad you quit college, have you? You better tell him straight.
That's when Shane glared at me with disdain.
Shut up. Just remember what'll happen if you tell Dad.
Does Shane want to talk about this himself? It's obvious that it would be better if he spoke directly rather than me telling Keith. After some hesitation, I decided not to tell Keith about Shane dropping out of college. I really wanted to talk to Keith about Shane's cold attitude towards me, but I didn't want to add to Keith's worries since he works late every night. After our marriage, Shane teamed up with my mother-in-law, who disliked me. My mother-in-law would pop by our house, a 30-minute drive away, and criticize how the cleaning wasn't up to par or how the meals were meager. One day, I was surprised to find her cooking dinner in the kitchen when I got home from work. Glancing at the trash bin, I saw the ingredients I had prepared earlier, thrown away mercilessly. She served beef and potato stew on the dining table, and started to have dinner facing Shane. Shane took a bite of the stew with a blissful expression.
Grandma's beef and potato stew is the best. Right?
She said, beaming with a smile.
Macy, why don't you learn to cook from Grandma? That way, you might be able to make decent meals. Poor Shane and Keith, having to eat terrible food every day. Leaving your husband and son to fend for themselves while you work all day, that's not what a good wife does. Keith is just too kind, letting you take advantage of him. If Grandma's house was closer, I'd go there for dinner every night.
I just couldn't comprehend her nerves, throwing away someone else's food and bad-mouthing others while enjoying a meal. And I only work part-time, so I get home in the early evening. I do all the housework during the week by myself to support Keith, who is busy. I just can't understand why I'm being criticized by my mother-in-law. In short, she's unhappy that her daughter-in-law works.
Why on earth did Keith remarry someone like you? He must have been tricked. He hasn't realized she's after his money. You think the same, don't you? Keith is a kind and stubborn man. I told him to marry a young lady from a prestigious family suitable for a company president, but he said he would choose his partner himself and wouldn't listen.
After bad-mouthing me for over 2 hours, my mother-in-law left, leaving only Keith's share of dinner behind. Reluctantly, I ate dinner with the side dishes I had in stock, when Shane looked down at me with pity in his eyes and smirked.
"Grandma still really hates you, huh?"
"Seems like it."
"Instead of just trying to please Dad, why don't you make an effort to be liked by your mother-in-law?"
I was astounded by his nerve to say such a thing after stirring up trouble himself. But well, it's fine as long as my mother-in-law lives separately. The problem is Shane. Being so openly hostile, I couldn't help but feel we would never get along, which left me feeling down. That night, as usual, Keith was working overtime, so Shane and I silently had dinner together. While cleaning up after dinner, Shane unusually started a conversation.
"Hey. What is it?" "Grandma invited me to go to Hawaii. Let's all go together."
I was taken aback.
"Huh, are you talking to me? Can I come along?"
"Yeah."
"When you go on a trip, you get to see a different side of people, so maybe you and I could get along better. That's what Grandma says, anyway."
Shane continued, his face flushing with embarrassment. "My mother-in-law is the chairwoman of a group of companies run by the family. She's not living on a pension, but is still actively working, so she must have some financial cushion. I'm happy that she invited me on the trip, but more than that, I'm glad to see her and Shane making an effort to get closer to me.
So, keep the 3rd week of next month free, okay?" "Got it, I'll take the time off."
That evening, when Keith came home from work and I told him about it, his voice dropped in disappointment.
"I've got a business trip overseas that week." "Then, should I turn them down?"
"No, go ahead.
If I stop by Hawaii on my way back, we might be able to grab a meal together." "That would be nice. But you've been really busy, haven't you? Are you getting enough rest?"
I voiced my concern, and Keith gave me a gentle smile. "I'm fine, thank you." Keith knew that my mother-in-law didn't like me.
To be invited on a trip by Mom, that's surprising. She can be stubborn and has a sharp tongue, but maybe she really does want to get along with Macy. Normally, you wouldn't want to go on a trip with someone you don't like.
With that, I made up my mind. I'm going to get along with my mother-in-law and Shane in Hawaii. I'll turn our previously strained relationship into something we can laugh about later, closing the gap between us. The day of the Hawaii trip eventually arrived. Shane and I went to the airport with Keith. After seeing Keith off on his direct flight to Los Angeles, Shane and I waited in the lobby for a while until my mother-in-law, pulling her suitcase, appeared. When I thanked her for inviting me on the trip, she smiled brightly.
"Hey, Macy. To avoid any trouble if you lose your wallet, how about you let me keep it for you?"
"Huh?"
"When we shop in Hawaii, I'm gonna cover everything, so you don't need it, right? Here, Shane too."
"All right." Since Shane handed his wallet to his mother-in-law, I also took out my long wallet from my bag and entrusted it to her. She opened my wallet, nodded contentedly, and said,
"You did bring your credit cards and bills."
"Well, please take care of it." Putting my wallet in her bag, my mother-in-law exchanged a glance with Shane and smirked. I felt a sense of foreboding looking at their expressions.
"And this, I was asked by Keith to give this to you. Could you open it right now?"
Baffled, I opened the envelope that my mother-in-law handed to me. The moment I took out the contents, I felt like I was about to stop breathing.
"A divorce notice? Why?"
My mother-in-law grinned triumphantly.
"You just couldn't get along with Shane and me. Keith has been complaining about you to me a lot."
"I heard it too.
He said he's totally fed up with being around you."
I felt like I was about to collapse.
"So, you're no longer needed. Goodbye."
My wallet." Ignoring my plea as if she hadn't heard it, my mother-in-law quickly left, pulling her suitcase behind her. I couldn't believe it. I couldn't believe that Keith, who was kind and sincere, had been bad-mouthing me behind my back to his mother and Shane. Staring at the signature on the divorce notice, my eyes widened in realization. This is Shane's handwriting. It looks similar to Keith's, but the unique quirks in the handwriting gave it away. My feelings instantly shifted from devastation to intense anger. I was a fool to trust these two. I was so determined to get along with them through this trip.
What a shame, loser. Maybe you'll never get to go on an overseas trip ever again.
With a despicable smirk on his face, Shane spat out those words.
I'm gonna have fun with my real family. You, fake mother, can just sleep on the streets.
Smiling back at Shane, who was sneering at me, I responded cheerfully. All right. I glared at Shane's back until he disappeared into the crowd. Until now, I had been holding back and enduring because they were Keith's family. But no more. I'm going to make them regret trampling over my feelings. Left penniless at the airport, I had no intention of succumbing to Shane and my mother-in-law's harassment. I used the transit card app on my cell phone to take the train and calmly went home. Shane commutes to university by bicycle, and the only functions my mother-in-law uses on her cell phone are messaging and calls. So they must have overlooked it. When I got home and my anger had somewhat subsided, I made a phone call to a certain person. After that, I spent some time spacing out on the sofa. It was a pity that the trip to Hawaii fell through, but I could go anytime I set my mind to it. Besides, there was no way it would have been fun with such mean-spirited people. Comforting myself with these thoughts, I spent the day reading books and watching dramas online, taking it easy. Come to think of it, this was the first time I had been alone since getting married. Even when Keith was away on business trips, Shane was around, and my mother-in-law would drop by unannounced, so there was always someone at home. The trip may have been ruined, but I could spend the entire week alone, doing whatever I pleased without having to see Shane or my mother-in-law. In a way, this was a luxurious vacation. The next day, after finishing my chores early, I went out to see a movie and enjoyed shopping at the mall. In the afternoon, while I was drinking tea and watching TV at home, my cell phone suddenly rang. I had been expecting this call around this time. Not wanting to answer right away, I ignored it for a while, but then the message notification sound kept ringing one after another. Annoyed, I finally answered the phone reluctantly, only to be shouted at by Shane.
Hey, old lady, get to Hawaii right now. What? Don't be ridiculous. The sound from the TV? Are you at home? Grandma snatched my wallet and cards. How the hell am I supposed to get back? I have a transit app installed on my phone. It has my credit card information, and honestly, I'm not having much trouble.
Well, fine, just get over here.
Did something happen?
Shane, clearly agitated, responded with a rough tone.
I had a reservation at the hotel's 3-star restaurant, but they wouldn't let me in. Oh really, why not?
I deliberately asked, feigning ignorance.
That damn owner said, unless Miss Macy is accompanying you, I'm afraid we must refuse service. Can you believe that? So, you missed out on the beef fillet steak? That's a shame. The night view from the 36th floor is fantastic, and the meat is so tender and delicious.
I couldn't help but laugh as I spoke to the ranting Shane. He was clearly not over it yet.
Even if I try to go to the other restaurants inside the hotel, the staff turns me away right at the door. The hotel staff is even whispering about us in English. It's so uncomfortable. I had no choice but to go out to the convenience store with Grandma, and we ended up having banana juice for dinner. There's a supermarket outside the hotel, right?
You know your stuff. Shane muttered suspiciously, but quickly got worked up again.
Damn it, why do I have to come all the way to Hawaii to be fed banana juice? Grandma got so angry she raised her blood pressure and had to lie down. This is all your fault.
I'm sorry, okay? I had no idea why this was my fault, but I apologized to avoid further hassle.
It's your fault, so you should compensate us for the hotel and meal expenses. We had a terrible experience because of you, so it's only right that you pay.
I couldn't help but laugh at this turn of events. All right, fine.
Wait, really? Yes. However, you'll need to repay the $5,000 I lent you first. And make sure to do it before I file for divorce. Oh, look at that, even after adding the hotel and meal expenses, there will still be change left over.
Shane fell silent all of a sudden. He must have been planning to default on his debt to me in the chaos of the divorce. Not that I had any intention of divorcing in the first place. After a brief silence, Shane spat out resentfully.
Just give that $5,000 to your stepchild as a gift. Such a stingy woman. This is why poor people will always be poor.
He really had the nerve to say whatever he wanted. At this point, I was so furious that I almost burst out laughing. Then I heard my mother-in-law's voice in the background.
Shane, are you talking to Macy?
Yeah, Grandma.
If you have something to say to her, better say it before we get divorced. We won't be seeing each other much longer.
Wait, let me talk to her. Macy, was your maiden name Smith? She asked with a tense voice. Yes, that's correct. I was expecting this question sooner or later.
Then, are you the daughter of the Smith Group?
Yes. My brother took over. I could hear a strange noise from the other end of the line. It seemed like my mother-in-law was about to faint, and Shane was panicking.
Grandma, what's wrong? If you're not feeling well, you should rest.
No, I'm fine. So that's why we got the reservation at the popular restaurant so easily. She murmured, still in shock.
The Smith Group? That's the chain of restaurants popular with celebrities, right? They're a big hit overseas too.
There was a pause before Shane exclaimed.
Wait, she's the daughter of the Smith Group?
Seems like it.
I wasn't told that. Were you hiding it? What a nasty woman.
Shane was ranting again, and I coolly responded.
That's strange. I'm sure I mentioned it during our pre-marriage introductions. Keith definitely knows about it.
Oh, did I? I've been so forgetful lately, it's troubling. She must have been half listening to what was being said about her future daughter-in-law. I added. My father was the president of the Smith Group before he passed away. I inherited his wealth, so I haven't been in need of money. I didn't marry Keith for his money, just to be clear.
Oh, I see. Then why are you working as a florist? You could live off Keith's earnings. A wife should quit her job and devote herself to her husband and children. That's right. Oh, in that case, I'll take that $5,000 back. Man, I should have asked for more money from a rich person like you. I missed an opportunity there.
Both my mother-in-law and Shane seemed shocked at first, but quickly reverted to their usual selves, throwing snide remarks my way.
The money I lent to Shane, I expect it to be returned.
That's a separate issue, isn't it?
You haven't submitted the divorce papers, have you?
Yeah, well.
Then, invest $1 million in our company.
I was at a loss for words. What?
A wife should do at least that much. To you, it's just pocket change.
I can't do that, no way. Even if I had the money, I couldn't give it to you. When I firmly declined, my mother-in-law, who had been whining in a coddled voice, suddenly turned aggressive.
What's wrong with you, stingy woman? Don't you even want to be useful? I feel sorry for Keith for marrying someone like you.
My mother-in-law started talking nonsense.
Fine, when Keith comes to Hawaii tonight, I'm gonna fill his ears with all sorts of bad stuff about you. He's gonna despise you and want a divorce. I think I'll make up some stories too. If I say I was bullied, our simple-minded dad will probably believe it.
Shane gleefully added to my mother-in-law's rant.
If you won't give us the money, we don't need a snotty daughter-in-law like you. I'll just tell Keith that you wrote the divorce papers yourself. He's the serious type, he's scary when he's mad. I'm looking forward to tonight.
You don't have to wait until tonight.
I've been listening here all along.
Keith said to his mother over the phone, and the two of them were silent.
Eh? Keith, you were supposed to join us after your business trip. You said you were working until yesterday and would arrive in Hawaii tonight.
My panicked mother-in-law and Shane were taken aback as Keith responded.
I got an image of the divorce papers from Macy, so I was surprised and called her back right away. I heard the story but was skeptical, so I rushed to finish my work and flew back home to listen to Macy and your conversation. Eh? Dad, you're misunderstanding something. Grandma and I were the ones being treated horribly by her,
Shane said, trying to sound sweet again. Heath cut him off sharply. It's too late now.
I've been listening to the whole conversation on speaker.
Who's the horrible one here?
It's Macy's fault for complaining. What a nerve, she even prepared the divorce papers for us out of kindness, my mother-in-law retorted.
Oh, that's right. You two are flying back tomorrow, aren't you?
I've already informed the police, I added. Police? Why? We haven't done anything wrong. Shane, you filled in the husband's section of the divorce papers, right? That's a forgery of a private document. You're getting arrested.
My line sent the two of them into turmoil, starting a blame game over the phone.
Hey, Grandma. If I knew we'd get arrested, I wouldn't have done it. What are you going to do about this? That has nothing to do with me. Shane was the one who planned and executed this whole mean thing to Macy. What? Are you kidding me?
Shane exploded at my mother-in-law over the phone.
The conversation isn't over yet. Mom, you knew Shane dropped out of college and was blowing a lot of money at strip clubs, yet you turned a blind eye and even gave him an allowance, didn't you?
Yeah, so what?
What's wrong with giving my adorable grandson some money?
That's right. Shane chimed in, backing her up. Heath coldly told them.
As long as you're paying from your own pocket, it's fine. But if you're embezzling from the company, that's a serious crime. That sounds bad, doesn't it?
Shane sounded pale over the phone.
Because, you see, I'm just a figurehead president. My salary is low.
Spare me, please. If I do that, I might lose the chance to take over my dad's company, you know? Shane lamented, and Keith declared.
That's not gonna happen. I'm going independent.
After a moment, Shane exclaimed.
Hey, that's not what we talked about. You said you'd make me your successor after I graduate from college. Who was the one who dropped out after a year? Damn it, okay, fine. I'll re-enroll in a different school and this time I'll study properly. So, keep your promise and let me be your successor. Do you think I can entrust my precious company to a son who speaks so rudely to Macy?
I felt a warmth in my chest as I looked at Keith's angry profile. Keith was on my side. I felt rewarded for enduring their harsh words all this time.
I'm going to establish a different company and I'll cut ties with you too.
My mother-in-law's scream came from the other end of the phone. Either Shane snatched the phone from her or she grabbed it herself because she started rattling off rapidly.
Keith, you're joking, right? Are you really going to prioritize that woman over your mother and your son, Shane? That's absurd, you'll definitely regret it. Please rethink this. Considering how you and Shane treated Macy, I think this is fair. You guys don't care about me, you're just blinded by the profits I bring in.
Heath spoke sternly to his mother.
I care more about Macy, who isn't even related to me by blood but still cares for me, than a family like you guys. Wait, don't hang up. I'll make sure Shane pays back his debt to Macy. So please, don't abandon just me.
Heath hung up in the middle of her sentence and immediately blocked her phone number and messages.
Macy, even if they contact you, just ignore them. Oh, okay. Hey, are you really going to cut ties with them?
I asked anxiously, and Keith said with conviction.
It's okay. As I told my mom just now, I have no intention of getting along with a son or a mother who talks rudely to Macy. I'm sorry for making you endure it for so long. I was too caught up in work, and I know it was hard for you to talk to me. No, it's okay. From now on, I will support Keith in place of your mother and Shane.
Heath smiled gently at me. It seems that after my mother-in-law and Shane returned to Japan, they intended to stay in a hotel for a while to evade the police. However, Keith informed the police about my mother-in-law's favorite hotel, so they were caught quite easily. This time, since I noticed the forgery and didn't submit it to the office, it was only attempted forgery of a private document, and since it was their first offense, they were sent home after a stern warning. However, the news of their arrest spread throughout the neighborhood, and my image-conscious mother-in-law could no longer go outside. Also, since she embezzled company funds, she was removed from her position as president while they were traveling, and she became unemployed. When relatives went to check on my in-laws' house, they found my mother-in-law in filthy pajamas, holed up in a dark room, a far cry from her fashionable days. It was also discovered that Shane had borrowed money not only from his mother but also from several relatives to fund his nights out at strip clubs. Since everyone in the family knew that Keith had cut ties with them, they demanded their money back immediately, fearing they might get cheated. To prevent Shane from running away, one of the relatives decided to let him live in their house and work as a handyman at their company. They would take his salary before giving it to him and use it to repay his debts. Shane was under constant surveillance by his relatives, a thorn in his side. At work, he was bossed around by employees younger than him, bowing his head and asking for work. As he promised, Keith started his own company with a few trusted subordinates. I continued my job at the flower shop as usual, sometimes using my flower arrangement qualification to decorate venues. One day, my work gained popularity for its good taste, and I even started getting called to decorate the venues of Keith's clients. Knowing that my work contributes to the positive image of Keith's company makes me incredibly happy. I want to continue to work hard and take pride in my job, supporting Keith along the way.
Where have you been? Hurry up and come back home.
All of a sudden, I received a call from my mother-in-law while lying in bed at my own apartment. She must have just realized that all of my stuff was gone from the house. And no wonder, since there had been nobody home until this afternoon. What? But I'm a stranger now. I could only imagine how my mother-in-law looked as she was at a loss for words over my reply. While it's too bad I couldn't see her face, I didn't want to continue the conversation, so I just hung up. She kept calling back several times, but I ignored them all. What a breath of fresh air it was. I had moved into my in-laws' house 3 years ago. After dating Hugo, who was my coworker at the time, for about 2 years, we decided to get married. It didn't take long after our marriage to realize that moving in with his family had been a mistake. Instead of returning to the apartment where I had lived alone, we came back from our honeymoon to the Smith's house.
From today, this is your home, Emily. Let's work together and support our family from now on.
Hugo stopped the car in front of the house and reached out his hand to me. I took his hand and replied with a smile, "I'm looking forward to it." I really believed that everything would work out living with such a kind-hearted Hugo. Since we got home late at night, we agreed to postpone the greetings until the next morning. Driven by the thought that I needed to wake up earlier than anyone else on my first day of living with them, I woke up at 5 a.m. the next morning. When I got out of bed and headed to the kitchen, I found that my mother-in-law, Mrs. Smith, was already there cooking. "Good morning, Mrs. Smith. I made it back safely last night. I'm looking forward to living with you." But no response came from my mother-in-law. When I raised my face, Mrs. Smith continued to move her hands without looking at me. I knew she could hear me, but as I was about to say, I heard a disdainful click of her tongue.
For a daughter-in-law to be waking up at this hour is outrageous. Isn't it normal to get up before everyone else and start preparing? I've already finished the laundry, and I'm just about to finish making breakfast and lunch.
I was left speechless by her sudden outburst of anger. Mrs. Smith, who had always been all smiles and reacted positively to me during the meetups and the moving process, now seemed furiously angry, a perfect description of her in that moment. After that, she completely stopped talking to me, and all I could do, unable to figure out what to do, was to stand frozen in a corner of the kitchen so as not to get in her way. "Good morning, huh? What's this? Looks like there's a useless person standing around doing nothing," said Hugo's sister Lily, who had just woken up, pointing at me and smirking. "That's right. From tomorrow, you'll be taking over everything, so I'm showing you how it's done now. Standing there silently means you're ready to do it perfectly from tomorrow, right?" Fear like I had never felt before washed over me, and every hair on my body stood on end. I realized it was my fault for becoming someone who waited for instructions, but I never expected to be completely left to handle everything the very next day. As I was trying to control my trembling body, Mrs. Smith told Lily, "Go wake up your father and brother." At Lily's glaring look, I finally managed to get moving. "I'll go," I said, moving my trembling legs towards the second-floor bedrooms. I knocked on my father-in-law's room first, and a sleepy voice responded from inside. Next, I opened the door to the bedroom where Hugo and I slept to find that Hugo seemed to have already woken up. "You're late. There's a lot to do, so make sure you wake me up on time," he grumbled and deliberately bumped into my shoulder as he walked out. Once again, I was struck by fear and trembling. Do I really have to live the rest of my life in fear like this? Where's the Hugo I knew until yesterday? What am I supposed to do? A fear I can't describe had me rooted to the spot. From the next day, my days in hell began. Having quit my job when I got married, I was now in charge of everything concerning the house. Not just the general housework, but also the community association duties and volunteering for litter pickup that my mother-in-law used to handle were all dumped on me. If you dilly-dally, there won't be enough hours in the day. "Well, it's clear you weren't brought up properly without a mother," said Mrs. Smith, thumping my back as I wiped the floor. "I don't have a mother. She fell ill soon after I was born and passed away. So, I have no memories with my mother, all my childhood memories are just with my father." But Mrs. Smith has no right to speak to me that way. My father raised me well. He taught me everything strictly so that no one could say I lacked anything because I didn't have a mother. I had many sleepless nights filled with frustration. No matter what Mrs. Smith or my sister-in-law Lily said, I just had to grit my teeth and bear it, while Hugo and my father-in-law just watched from a distance. Hugo, who I believed would be on my side for life, quickly sided with Mrs. Smith and the rest. I couldn't discuss this with my father. I didn't want to repay him for raising me on his own with this kind of trouble. While enduring harassment about housework daily, I also had to attend to Hugo. With no time to sleep, my health steadily declined. After 3 years of this life, I finally became pregnant. It was a long, difficult journey. For about a year, I had been harassed not just about the housework but also for not being able to have a child. A woman who can't bear children is worthless to this house and to the world. Every time she said that, my heart was crushed, wishing morning would never come. Part of the reason was that Hugo once said to me, "Mom says so too, if we don't have a kid in the next 6 months, let's get a divorce," presenting me with the filled-out divorce papers. But now, a longed-for little life was sprouting inside me. I thought I would no longer have to hear Mrs. Smith's sarcasm because of it, but her treatment of me didn't change one bit. Instead, she said, "Do you think you can be a good mother like that, without giving me a break even when I was suffering from morning sickness? Lack of sleep, overwork, and morning sickness." I used to look forward to the day I would meet my child, but by then, I had started wishing I could just give up the pregnancy. Even as the morning sickness gradually subsided, frustration with my uncooperative body grew. I had hoped having a child would break the cycle of daily misery, but I realized that was not the case. I thought I had no choice but to run away or give up when suddenly my father passed away. It was so sudden. Apparently, he had been telling his colleagues at work that he wasn't feeling well. Perhaps knowing his time was short, a will was found on the desk in his study. As expected, all the members of Hugo's family, except for Hugo himself, didn't show up at my father's funeral. After the funeral, as I returned to my family home, the doorbell rang as if someone had timed it. It was a friend of my father's who had attended the funeral. This friend turned out to be a lawyer. His business card read Young. And then, Mr. Young handed me my father's will. I was told to open it and see, and when I opened the desk at my father's, which also contained his will, I found a list detailing an inheritance to be passed on to me. The amount was a staggering $3 million. It seems my father held the dual roles of a salaried worker and an investor. All of this was to be inherited by me, and I went through with all the necessary procedures. Next to me, an excited Hugo was thanking Mr. Young, saying, "Thank you so much." After Mr. Young had left, Hugo, with a spring in his step, said, "Well, I'm heading home first," and returned to his in-laws' house. It appears there was also an estimate for the post-death cleanup of my father's belongings, and it was noted that there would be no problem if I contacted the company, so I oversaw the house being emptied. A week after my father passed, when I returned to the in-laws' house for the first time in a long while, the whole family was there at a time when they would usually be absent. "Welcome back. You must be tired. Take it easy, all right? The baby is going to be born soon, so you need to rest." It was the first time in 3 years that I felt the hairs on my body stand on end. It was a chilling feeling, just like before I got married, to see the in-laws' attitude change so drastically. Despite the usual stern faces and glaring eyes, they were now all smiles at me. Seeing Hugo grinning beside Mrs. Smith, I realized what was happening. Surely, Hugo must have told them about the inheritance. That's why they were so obviously turning their attitude around like this. For a week, I was treated like a princess. At the same time, I found it strange that my father-in-law and Hugo stayed home without going to work. "We're going to take a trip from tomorrow. Your father and Hugo have worked hard for so long, but with your inheritance, there's no need to work anymore. Think of it as a well-deserved break. We'll be off, so take care of the house, okay?" One morning, I woke up to noise at the front door and went to check, still rubbing my sleepy eyes, to find Mrs. Smith with her suitcase. She told me, "We really wanted to take you too, but you know, with the baby and all, we should wait until after the baby's born and things have settled down. See you later," and with that, they left with high spirits, and I pumped my fist in secret as I watched their car drive away. I never thought this day would come. The moment I had been longing for had arrived in the most unexpected way. I quickly went back inside, packed my few belongings into a large suitcase and a single cardboard box, and moved straight into Mr. Young's place. In fact, over the past week, I had been carefully planning this escape with Mr. Young. The diary of harassment I had been subjected to, the recordings on my phone I thought might come in handy one day. I was told they would be useful, and I didn't forget to bring them. And I also had the divorce papers that had been thrust at me when I was told, "If we can't have kids, let's get a divorce." Signed by my in-laws, even the witness section was filled out. The submission to the office went through without a hitch. And I felt all my strength drain away the moment it was all over. Later, I moved into an apartment Mr. Young had arranged for me and was taking some time to rest when Mrs. Smith contacted me.
"Where did you go? Get back here right now."
They must have returned from their trip and noticed that all my belongings were gone. Looking at the clock, I realized that 5 days had passed since I left my in-laws' place. Time sure flies, I thought, as I responded to Mrs. Smith. "Huh? I'm a stranger to you now." Mrs. Smith seemed to be at a loss for words.
"What are you talking about? We're family, aren't we? It's not like we're strangers."
It sounded like Hugo was on speaker. And I could faintly hear Lily and my father-in-law's voices agreeing in the background. "That divorce paper you handed me, filled out and all, that meant you wanted a divorce, right? So, I just did what you wanted, got a divorce. I'm sick and tired of being treated like a maid in that house." It was then that I first realized I could stand up for myself so firmly. Rather, I wish I had started doing this much sooner.
"Huh? What are you talking about? That was just to say that divorce might be on the cards. I never meant it seriously."
I could hear Hugo and the others' voices becoming frantic. "Well, the divorce is done, no helping it now. Let's get on with the property settlement. The inheritance you received, $1.5 million, that's Hugo's, right? When are you gonna transfer it?" Oh, was Mrs. Smith, my mother-in-law, this unreasonable? I sat up, perching on the edge of the bed. Inheritance is considered separate property, which means it's not subject to division during a property settlement. So I don't have anything to give you. In fact, it looks like I'm the one who should be getting compensation for harassment and a share of the property. Upon hearing this, the in-law family's outcry was unimaginable. I quit my job, and what about the payment for the trip? How are we gonna handle that? Their complaints were audible. I couldn't help but let a smirk cross my lips. Poor things. You've reaped what you sowed. How much did you spend on this trip? I bet you had more fun than you could ever imagine. Well, you're gonna have to work hard to enjoy life as much as you did on your trip. With that momentum, I hung up the phone and quickly blocked all the in-laws' contacts. The family home where my father lived is already being managed by a realtor, and they don't know the address of this apartment. If I don't agree to meet them, I doubt I'll ever see them again. Later, I was informed by the realtor that they'd been arrested. Apparently, thinking I had fled to the family home, the four of them broke into what they thought was an empty house by shattering a window. But there was nothing inside, just the ringing of the security company's alarm. Ignoring the alarm, they searched the house and, finding nothing, were subdued by the arriving security guards and the police. I was relieved that this happened after I had received the compensation and property settlement. I haven't been informed about what happened to the in-law family afterward. They must be making a living somehow, but I have no way of knowing since I don't have their contact information. A while after the in-laws were caught, I gave birth to a healthy baby boy. I named him Max. A name filled with the hope that he would see the truth and live sincerely.
I haven't touched my father's inheritance and am living modestly on what I earn from my part-time job.
Life might be tough ahead, but for my dear son's sake, I plan to keep looking forward, discerning the truth as I go. A measly $5 condolence money is plenty for a poor single mom, huh? Tossing a coin like flipping a nickel isn't appropriate anywhere, let alone at a funeral home. If someone did that, it would be no surprise if they were considered to have tossed their common decency as a person aside. And there stands such a person right in front of me. To think that it's my former boss just turns my anger into sheer disbelief. He's grinning now, but it didn't take long for his face to turn ashen. My name is Julie, and I'm turning 28 this year. Still unmarried, I live with my mother who raised me single-handedly. Until a few years ago, my brother Kevin also lived with us, but he's currently on an overseas assignment. Though Kevin is also single, he seems to be enjoying his life abroad. Economic reasons forced me to give up on college, so I went straight to work after graduating from a vocational high school. After my father passed away when I was in elementary school, I saw how hard my frail mother worked to raise us, and I wanted to repay her kindness as soon as I could. That's why I worked hard in vocational school, earning several qualifications and managing to get a job in one of the big local companies right after graduation with just a high school diploma. My mother, of course, and even my teachers praised me. Since the company rarely hired anyone without a college or professional degree, it was considered quite an accomplishment for the school. In that company, I worked my tail off to repay the favor of being hired, and I took care of household chores since my mother often fell ill. I wanted Kevin to properly graduate from college, so I put my life on hold and supported him. Thanks to my efforts, Kevin was able to continue his education, and I managed to get my mother to retire from her job. My hard work at the job was recognized, and I was assigned to the sales department. When my boss said, "Office work is fine, but sales suit you better," I was full of anxiety, but it turned out he was right, sales really were my thing. My performance soared, and in no time I surpassed my peers and became the ace of the team. However, the important thing here is not to get cocky about being great. In reality, I've grown with the support of many people, and it's not just my own effort that has gotten me here. While supporting each other every day with my colleagues, the sales manager who had been looking after me for years got transferred to start up a new branch. He was essentially part of the founding team. They asked me to come along, but I turned it down because I live with my mother. The person brought in to fill his shoes was Mr. Nunley, someone the president scouted for his skills. Certainly, Mr. Nunley was good at his job and had a polite and prompt manner, which made him quite popular with our clients. However, he gradually began to stand out in a bad way within the company. Despite this, because he was competent at his job, the boss, who had scouted him, had his reputation on the line, and I believe everyone was really putting up with a lot. I felt the same way, having been made to feel uncomfortable by Mr. Nunley on numerous occasions. When I was new, Mr. Nunley said, "Let's go visit some clients together." Not realizing his true nature at the time, I happily agreed. We made a good impression on the clients, and even secured a new contract right there, which led him to suggest we go out for drinks to celebrate. I had no reason to decline, so we found a nearby bar and toasted. Then Mr. Nunley started pushing me to drink more and more.
"Julie, you can really hold your liquor. Of all the girls I've drunk with, you're the strongest."
I was shocked when he suddenly started calling me Julie instead of using my last name, and as I was trying to process this, he overlaid his hand on mine. "Man, at this rate, you're gonna be out drinking me. Would you take care of me if I passed out?" His hand felt clammy and disgusting, and it made my skin crawl. Although I had dated a few guys before, I had never felt such revulsion, and without thinking, I pulled my hand away. "What's the matter? Didn't like that?" "No way, you're not saying that, 'cause you agreed to come out for drinks, right?" He looked at me with a creepy smile that made me shiver, and he reached for my hand again. "Or what? You know what would happen if you refused, right? I'm your boss. You get that, don't you?" This time he didn't just place his hand on mine, he gripped it tightly, and I had reached my limit. I shook off his hand. "Sorry. I'm not feeling well, I need to leave. This is for my part of the bill." I pulled out a $50 bill from my wallet, slammed it on the table, and quickly left the bar. I knew $50 was too much, but at that moment, I didn't have the luxury to think about it.
"You'll remember this next week."
Mr. Nunley's words hit my back, but without looking back, I frantically ran all the way to the station. Once there, I rushed into the bathroom and scrubbed the place he touched until it was red, and then I started to cry softly. My father would have been close to Mr. Nunley's age if he were still alive. I didn't mind being shown affection, but I just couldn't accept it from someone my father's age. For 23-year-old me, it was quite a shocking event. It was Friday, so I didn't have to see Mr. Nunley until Monday. Honestly, I wasn't in the mood to go to the office. But if I skipped work, I would worry my mom, so I dragged myself to work where an unbelievable amount of paperwork was piled on my desk. "You're late. I got your work ready for you. Make sure you do it right." Gone was the kind atmosphere of before. Mr. Nunley was now incredibly cold to me, and everyone looked on in surprise. Since he was only acting this way towards me, it made everyone worry that something might have happened. Though I said it was nothing, inside I was really hurt by Mr. Nunley's harassment. I was given so much work, I wondered when I would finish, and he would repeatedly criticize it without ever explaining what was wrong. "Figure it out yourself," he'd say, but then he'd turn around and say my method was wrong. It was all just so bothersome. Everyone was concerned for me, but I was determined not to let it show that I was beaten. By that time, my mom had started to weaken, and Kevin was still in his junior year of college, so quitting my job was not an option. Enduring harassment from Mr. Nunley every day, I turned 26 before I knew it. Kevin had graduated and got a job which immediately took him overseas, so it was just my mom and me living together when it happened. Like usual, Mr. Nunley was scolding me for over an hour when the company phone rang. It was my mom's hospital on the line, saying they'd tried my cell and couldn't reach me, so they called my workplace. They said my mother had collapsed and they wanted me to come to the hospital right away. I thought about explaining the situation to Mr. Nunley and asking to leave early, but he didn't take it well. "What are you saying? You hardly get any work done, and now you want to take advantage of the company's policy just because it suits you?" Mr. Nunley said with a sneer, his lips curled in disdain. But this was no time for an argument. I was out of time. "Fine, just quit your job already. Your performance has been dropping anyway, and there's no benefit for the company to keep someone useless like you around. That's why I hate hiring high school grads." I felt my fingertips go cold and I could hear my heartbeat. "That's too much," a part-timer raised her voice in my defense, but Mr. Nunley's tirade didn't stop. "There's no such thing as too much. It's always this girl acting all high and mighty. It's been ticking me off. It's better for everyone if he just quits now. Mr. Nunley, grinning as if expecting me to apologize. Normally, I would have quickly apologized, but at that moment, I was too frantic. I couldn't be squabbling over this when my mother was in danger. Got it. I'll bring in my resignation later, but for today, I'm out of here. I hastily gathered my things, ignoring everyone shouting hey, as I bolted from the office and headed to the hospital. Fortunately, my mother was still alive when I arrived, and she had just woken up. However, her condition wasn't good, and I was told that maybe soon it might be her time. Although I'd impulsively spoken of resigning, it might have been the right choice. Messages of concern came from my colleagues and peers at the office, but my mind was made up. I finished the handover in a month and started a new life taking care of my mother. She said she was okay, but watching her unsteady walk, I felt reassured about leaving the company. I had enough savings to live on for a while, and Kevin, saying I can't be there for you, sent a generous amount of money, so there were no problems for just the two of us. Plus, the stress from Mr. Nunley was gone, and for the first time in a while, I slept well. I was enjoying the relaxed times with my mother that I hadn't had for years, but it didn't last. One morning, a year after starting to care for her, my mother wasn't in the living room where she usually watched TV before me. When I rushed to check on her, I found her sleeping with a pale face. The ambulance took her to the hospital, and there I was told that her heart was much weaker now, and she only had a few days left. No response came from her, no matter how much I held her hand or called out to her. She breathed shallowly, occasionally twisting her face in pain. I contacted Kevin to come home immediately, and begged the hospital to let me stay by my mother's side around the clock. In my dreams, my mother was smiling. "You don't have to hold on anymore. Go do what you want," she said as she went off into the distance.
Wait, don't go! I'd chase after her, but I could never catch up.
The distance grew, and the moment my mother disappeared into the light, I woke up. In a panic, I checked the monitor attached to my mother's heart, and it seemed to be working, faintly. Relieved, I took a breath, and that's when the door opened and Kevin walked in. Silently, he grasped my mother's hand, and for the first time in days, she opened her eyes. "Welcome back." She squeezed our hands tightly and murmured. The moment Kevin and I exchanged looks, a flatline alarm sounded. My mother must have been waiting for Kevin. And with the last of her strength, she woke up to say goodbye to us. That day, my mother set off to join my father. At my mother's funeral, her friends and my former colleagues came to pay their respects. They all paid tribute to my mother and offered us their condolences. As I was spacing out, taking over for Kevin at the reception, Mr. Nunley appeared.
"Hey there, high school grad. Heard your mom passed away? Looks like you were raised by her alone, so now you're all by yourself, huh?"
As he said this, he took out his wallet.
"Here's a condolence money for you. But for a poor kid from a single-parent family, $5 should be more than enough."
With that, he tossed a $5 note which landed on the floor. The moment it hit, Mr. Nunley burst into laughter. "Did you hear that pathetic sound? Just like you guys. Ah, so pitiful. Such a modest funeral, and the daughter he worked so hard to raise is jobless. That's just too sad." Looking at Mr. Nunley laughing loudly, completely out of place at the funeral home, I just watched him coldly. He wasn't worth any emotion. The funeral home staff looked back and forth between me and Mr. Nunley, clearly flustered but at a loss for what to do. "Are you the boss from my sister's company?" Before I knew it, Kevin was by my side, asking Mr. Nunley in a low voice. When Mr. Nunley, still wiping away tears, said yes, Kevin took out his business card. "I'm this.
We had a special contract with your company, but I'm gonna terminate that deal."
Mr. Nunley took the card and immediately started shaking. And no wonder, the business card bore the name of an IT company that had a direct contract with the president. And above Kevin's name, it read CEO. I was as unaware of this as Mr. Nunley was, and when I looked at Kevin, he had a mischievous smile. "A company with employees like you is not one we can do business with. We don't need this $5 either, So would you please head back right now and report to your president how your screw-up is gonna cost your company millions? Kevin pressed the $5 coin back into Mr. Nunley's hand and called over the staff to drag him out. Mr. Nunley tried several times to get back in through the automatic doors, but each time he was chased out by security, and eventually, the police took him away. Later on, the president came to my house with a box of sweets. Despite everything, Kevin decided to continue the contract with the president's company but under the condition that Mr. Nunley be fired. True to his word, Mr. Nunley was fired for causing the company losses and is now getting by with day labor. He must be bitterly regretting the value of that $5 coin he threw. I had thought he was scouted by our company, but it turned out the president had just been saddled with a problem child by someone else. When we reported the harassment we had received, the president also mentioned taking legal action. I think now that I should have reported it sooner, but at this age, the hardship of living day to day facing a hefty damages claim is no ordinary matter. In that sense, maybe the timing turned out to be just right. Kevin went back overseas soon after. Initially, he worked at his assignment, but he ended up starting an IT company with someone he became friends with there. He said he waited to tell us until things were on track, which is why it took so long, but it's still pretty amazing. He's planning to bring his friend to the US and move the headquarters here soon, and he's working on getting everything ready. As for me, I've been called by the sales manager who moved to the branch office, and I'm going to work there. Although it means I have to leave my childhood home, Kevin will use it, so it's left as is. Even though there's a bit of a gap since I've been away, I'm working hard to repay the kindness of the sales manager who's been so good to me. It's been a year since my mother died. I wonder if she's met my father. Kevin and we're gonna live on, holding on to the happiness our parents gave us.